All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really radical theory, one that connects the pharaohs of ancient Egypt all the way to the modern war on terror. Yeah, I know, it's going to be a wild ride, so you're definitely going to want to buckle up for this one. So let's start with a question you've probably been asked a million times, right? What actually makes a great leader? We all have this idea in our heads, something that's been kind of drilled into us since we were kids in school. And I bet you're thinking of things like this, right? Empathy, wisdom, a sense of responsibility, being open, having knowledge. I mean, these are the classic textbook answers, the stuff we're supposed to say. Well, what if I told you that according to the theory we're digging into today, all of that is completely and totally wrong? So instead of empathy, this theory argues you need a distinct lack of it. Instead of openness, you need to be unpredictable. The source we're looking at argues that to really hold power, the most effective leaders throughout history, we're talking everyone from ancient kings to modern presidents, they didn't need the textbook stuff. They needed these three kind of shocking skills. Okay, so here's where it gets really fascinating. You've got these three totally separate sounding traits, right? Unpredictability, high stress tolerance, no empathy. Well, you can actually wrap them all up in a single psychological term: dissociation. It's basically the mind's ability to just detach from reality, to step outside of yourself and watch your own life like it's a movie. And the lecturer we're analyzing, well, they take this even a step further. They basically equate this with what we would commonly call multiple personality disorder. And just think about that for a second. Imagine the kind of power that gives someone in, say, a high-stakes negotiation or a spy mission. They can literally be a different person for every different circumstance. They could be loyal to 2, 3, 5 competing groups, and no one would ever figure it out. Okay, so this brings up a huge question, right? If this ability to disassociate is the ultimate key to power, can you create it in someone? Can you program it? Well, according to this theory, the answer is a big, fat yes. And the blueprint for how to do it, it's 5,000 years old. The source speculates that what we think of as Egyptian mythology, all those stories about the gods, wasn't just a bunch of stories. It was actually a carefully designed programming script. The idea is that the pharaoh would be forced to ritually act out the roles of these three key gods, basically creating separate, distinct, and most importantly, controllable personalities, all inside his own mind. Now look, it is absolutely vital to point out that the lecturer is very, very clear about this. They straight up admit, this is all speculation. It's a theory, right? It's an attempt to interpret what would have been, if it's true, the single greatest state secret of ancient Egypt. So how would they do it? Well, the theory claims this programming was done through a series of incredibly intense, brutal, trauma-inducing rituals. We're talking about things specifically designed to shatter a person's psyche, to force that dissociation we talked about, and ultimately to make the pharaoh a completely controllable tool for the priest. And this is where the theory takes its most shocking, most unbelievable turn. The claim is that this 5,000-year-old script, it didn't just die out with the pharaohs. Nope, it came back. It reemerged in the 21st century, right in the middle of the war on terror. So after 9/11, we all remember seeing those horrible images of prisoner abuse coming out of places like Abu Ghraib. The official story you'll remember was that this was enhanced interrogation designed to get information. But this theory, it argues the real goal was something else entirely, something much, much darker. And, there's some things that make you wonder. For instance, we know for a fact that the CIA paid 2 psychologists $80 million to develop these enhanced interrogation programs. 80 million. And then you listen to the testimony from the detainees themselves about what was done to them. And the parallels to that ancient Egyptian script, well, they're honestly chilling. Being put in a box, being cut up, being sexually humiliated. The theory says this wasn't just random sadistic cruelty. It was a script, a direct, step-by-step reenactment of the ancient Osiris ritual. And its purpose wasn't to get information, it was to program a person. But here's the kicker. According to this theory, the whole experiment completely backfired. The goal was to take a virtuous hero, the terrorist, and turn them into a passive victim, a controllable citizen. But instead of creating passive people, the torture created a whole new generation of angry, vengeful fighters. And the name they eventually chose for their group? ISIS.
a name with a direct, undeniable link to the Egyptian goddess who brings Osiris back from the dead.
Okay, so this whole idea of targeted programming, it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It actually connects to a much bigger and 100% real, declassified CIA program that was all about mass social control. Yep, we're talking about Project MK Ultra. This was a real thing, a declassified US government program from the 50s to the 70s to see if people could actually be brainwashed using things like LSD and hypnosis. Now, the official story is that the project ended and, it was basically a failure, but the source we're examining asks a really important question. What happened to all that research? Where did it go? And this leads to the lecture's absolutely chilling conclusion. Those techniques weren't just abandoned, they were perfected. And then they were deployed not on one person, but on a mass scale. We all became the experiment. So, what does this mean for us? For you and me today? The suggestion here is that the basic principles of that ancient control script, they're now just part of our everyday lives. I mean, just think about it for a second. The theory goes that in the exact same way those ancient priests used rituals and smells and sounds to trigger different personalities in the Pharaoh, our modern systems, mass media, education, social media, they do the same thing. They use different inputs to shape our behaviors, our beliefs, and maybe even our core identity. Which brings us to the final and maybe the most provocative question this whole theory leaves us with. It's a really challenging thought, but it's the one we're going to leave you with today. If you were being programmed, how would you even know?